we actually grew our net worth 3 times. Frankly, the government incentivizes us to be entrepreneurial. We're looking at multiple streams of income. And for the long game,
Welcome back, investor, to another episode of the Passive Income Adventures. We have Sharon Riddle with us today from just north of Dallas, Texas. Say hello, Sharon.
hello, viewers. And I'm really glad to be here with you and Emma today.
So I'm really looking forward to getting that discussion of what's going on in the state of multifamily or multifamily general partner, experienced investor, been doing real estate since 2005. You've been doing multifamily specifically since 2015 and like the glory days of multifamily. So it's interesting from your perspective. What we're going to hear is how things have changed over the last 9 years, where you see the state of the industry right now, and your optimism for the future, which I share, but it's more important now to be a good steward of our money and finding good stewards of our investments. So I'm looking forward to diving to that with you. If this is your first time listening to the show, Passive Income Adventures, name should be pretty self-explanatory. We talk about how to get more passive income so that you can go on more adventures. So you have both the money to do it and the time to do it. But we try and peel away the layers and the hype and the marketing behind it and give you a real picture. My husband and I retired before age 50 on our real estate income, and now we travel full time, interview other people who are doing the same. We raise capital to put into both private lending and also for equity investments into deals like what Sharon offers. And so we're just like past, present, future, like where are they coming from? What are they working on right now? And then what are their own passive income dreams for the future? If you are finding yourself in that position of wondering, hey, I have some money, I need to figure out what to do with it, or you're in your 50s wondering, can I really keep doing this job till I'm 65 at 40, 50, 60 hours a week, and you're just trying to figure out your exit plan, the show is for you. So thank you for coming on and sharing your story.
I tripped up in the time.
Just take us back in time to when you first got into real estate in 2015 and over your evolution over the past, goodness, what that's been almost 20 years, 19 years you've been doing this, and what you've been seeing to get us up to the current day, and now how maybe the things you've learned that you'll always do, fundamentals, and some things that you've learned that you're changing, which are the details.
Okay, back in 2005, we started out in single family. I was self-managing a single family rental portfolio, grew into that, and then bang, 2008 came along and we had that credit crunch. We felt it a little bit beforehand. Thankfully, I had another mentor in my back pocket, a coach. That was Alan Cowgill. So I pivoted to private lending. I had to have other people be the bank because the bank didn't want to be the bank. They just wanted to take the rental checks, but they really didn't want to really have any loans for real estate investment properties. So thank goodness we went to Alan Cowgill's boot camp in San Antonio, Texas, around 2009 timeframe, because we found out that there were other people that were very interested in making money as the bank. We had a neighbor who's a nurse. She had a rental property, so she understood the concept. We had a couple of friends in Saginaw, Texas. One had been in banking and then with Burlington Northern Santa Fe. And then the other one was an IT guy. And the first private lender was my father-in-law. So he really hopped on board right during that time. And that's the way we could really expand that portfolio. However, what we discovered is we could not expand it enough for us. And that's when we started searching again what kind of tool we use to make this dream come true. So that was multifamily. And it was a single family coach who really gave me the promo code to go to Brad Simrock's first rest retirement for us. And that was in 2015.
Okay, so when you say you couldn't expand it enough, what do you mean by that? Is it that scaling the single family business wasn't helping you hit the financial goals that you had? Or tell me more about that.
Sure. We weren't hitting the financial goals.
Okay.
Even in single family, we had our own metrics, our own KPIs. Dan, my spouse, just like your spouse is your partner, my spouse is mine. He still has an aerospace W-2 job. And part of the early goal was to retire him out. But we're going to need about 30 single family rentals to do that. And because of the appreciation in Dallas-Fort Worth, which is where all of our portfolio resided, we really couldn't make that happen. And so the scalability occurred more in the multifamily when we became multifamily investors. And so what we did is we took part of our gains and moved it over from single family as we sold off the houses, the rentals. And during that time period, Dan did receive a substantial inheritance from his dad's estate as well. So we had more seed money. So we could really, really grow it. So that's what happened in that time.
So your father-in-law, who was one of your private lenders, and passed away, his estate basically funded more acquisitions?
Part of his estate did. And part of it was the growth that we had experienced in the single family rentals. So it's a dual track. It was a two-pronged, very interesting time.
Yeah, it's almost like I never really thought about that because I know a lot of people have their parents as private lenders or their first investors are their parents. But I never really thought about like you're growing your parents' net worth that eventually you'll inherit. I've never heard anybody describe it like that before, but that's often the case of what happens. And my parents didn't ever invest in anything where my mom died when I was pretty in my early 30s before doing any of this. And when my dad passed away, almost our entire inheritance that we received from him was our childhood family home.
Mhm.
And I remember walking away from that and thinking, I'm the only one who's taking my portion of this inheritance and going and investing in real estate. The rest of them all, my siblings all went into deeper into the stock market. They have some real estate holdings, their personal homes, maybe a one or two rental homes, but for the most part, they're not into real estate. And I'm like, but we made this money, this inheritance was from real estate. And so we always think that's funny that I became a real estate investor, and that's exactly what I did with the money we made off the real estate. So can you tell?
We did a very similar thing. And what's interesting is Dean and I just grew that. We actually grew our net worth 3 times from
Okay.
where it began in the single family rental.
You said something about the scalability of it. That we needed to get our financial goals. We needed 30 rental houses, and that wasn't possible in the market. So I have 2 questions surrounding that. One, how did you arrive at that number? Because the 30 to 50 rental houses in single family rental is the same number I arrived at when we were figuring out our own financial goals, what we needed to do. And 2, did you ever consider investing in a different market? So instead of going into multifamily or different kinds of asset classes, you say, oh, well, we can do this. We just need to do it in Indianapolis or something like that. So how did you get at that number one? And did you ever consider going outside of Dallas?
Honestly, Dean arrived at that. He's the technical person. I've been more the financial analyst person. So it's more money, like raw numbers guy.
Right.
And he came up with that number. That's something that he arrived at. He's also got a math minor, so we're like his best friends. He arrived at that number. And yeah, that's where we went on that one. I found when we came into multifamily, we were thinking really too small, honestly, Emma. We were
Yeah.
really thinking too small. But I will say, as far as self-managing, I didn't see where I could transport myself into another market. And since we're both third generation native Texans, we know the Texas Triangle, which is really, as you well know, is more the Dallas Fort Worth, San Antonio, Austin, Houston. That's where all 80% of the people live there. 80% of the commerce is conducted there in the state of Texas. I will say, interestingly enough, on the multifamily side, being in a couple of masterminds, I've run across some people that have made me rethink some of those things. But it's only because of my exposure to people who have expertise outside of those markets. But at that time, I did not have access to that sort of network.
Yeah. That's been the biggest difference for me too, that the more people I meet, the more ideas I get. And people talk about shiny object syndrome and squirrel, and they're unable to focus because it's the next greatest thing. But what I've found has been sometimes that's a problem at the beginning. But when you first found multifamily, were you thinking like duplex, triplex, or were you thinking like 100 units?
We were thinking about like small multifamily, but we're like, oh, the small is too small. We can do like 100. We can, even as a passive investor. And what we've accumulated over that time period, we've invested in 18 multifamily properties.
Okay.
And it's totaled to 3,507 doors
Okay.
over almost a decade. Half has gone full cycle. Yeah, we were thinking really too small. And it's almost, our mindset was almost where a lot of Del Walmsley's students start. That's his model. But we discovered that was not Brad Sumrock's model. And he started out with lifestyle. However, it was more expansive. Their thinking in that community was more expansive than what we had been introduced to, even in OREA.
Now, when we lived in Austin for 20 years, and I heard the Lifestyles radio commercials all the time, interviewed the founder on one of my podcasts last year, and I'm unclear. You tell me what you think. Dallas is the multifamily mecca, and I'm not sure if it's because of Lifestyles and Sumrock who started there because there's so much multifamily inventory, or if it became the multifamily mecca just because that's where they happened to be and where it was. But I've been influenced by the multifamily culture of Lifestyles even in Austin and before I ever got into real estate investing, just from my exposure to their radio show. So can you talk to me a little bit about, do you feel lucky that you were in Dallas? What is it about Dallas that is so good for multifamily investing?
Well, I feel pretty fortunate. Being in Denton, I can be like away from it's a college town. It's a little quirky. Some people in Denton kind of want to be Austin, but they're not big enough to be Austin.
Yeah.
That kind of situation. But they are. That little quirky, it's a little quirky too, but on a smaller scale, about 120,000 people. But I would say, as far as Dallas, I think it's very employer driven. Ian and I have talked about the contrast between Fort Worth or Tarrant County and Dallas County. Dallas has always really been known more as a banking center. Even in my first position that I had right out of college, a friend got me a position at Arca Oil and Gas, and it was known as a rural banking center. It has a Federal Reserve. There's a reason for that. But over in Tarrant County and Fort Worth, you have a lot more defense contractors. So you still have in both of those cities some highly paid W earners. They're just in different sectors. And then you've got that Goldman Sachs headquarters that's coming in.
Yeah. One thing I've noticed the difference between Dallas and when we moved to Salt Lake City 6 years ago. So February of 2018, we left Austin, ended up in Salt Lake City. And that was the drive that changed our lives, right? Because I left my business behind and I had to rethink, like, what am I going to do? My husband has this new job and I've got nothing as far as professionally. And for me, what I've noticed when I got into multifamily very quickly after we moved to Salt Lake City versus what I was seeing in the Austin and Dallas markets, I almost regretted that we left at that point. I needed to go to Salt Lake to be exposed to all of this real estate investing thing. But then I looked back and we don't have inventory here. You're not going to find in Salt Lake City buying a 150 unit building that was built in 1986 or 1992. Like you find in Dallas, there's so much more inventory. And here, if you want multifamily, you have to build it. So we immediately started getting into development because I just knew that there was an opportunity there. But Dallas just has so much inventory that's trading, Houston as well, that Salt Lake really has just never had that. I think it's just because it was a small town until 20 years ago. So I don't know how, I guess that's the thing is Dallas was growing a lot bigger many years ago when they were building all of these apartments.
You had banking, but you have a lot of really large hospitals batted in the Dallas area. Or two, because you have Cook's Children. You have a lot of really large ones and even a teaching hospital because you have UT Southwest. You've got that hospital out there. And it is like a city itself. It's so huge. And many of these are really large. Baylor, Scott and White, and a lot of really large ones. So you have access to healthcare, but you also have access to a wide array of medical professionals. And a lot of medical professionals just starting out, they're going to be apartment dwellers typically.
Yeah.
And we have one that I'm actually going to be touring that was a passive investment. Oh, and it's positioned over in that area, the medical art district. And that's who they cater to. It's younger because you've got radiology. You've got just a whole array of people, not just doctors and nurses. It's just all these people who
for medical complex in Dallas.
They're all people who know how to operate the technology that they use on you.
Yeah. And I wonder, when you're in a place like Dallas and there's so much going on, and like I said, Salt Lake is more like Dallas in the 90s, right? Like you're seeing all the cranes and all the construction. So maybe in 20 years, it'll be more like Dallas with inventory. You can actually buy a value add apartment building. Very difficult to do now. But how do you diversify? What other markets are you in? And how do you make sure that you're not too over concentrated in one aspect, one geography, one asset class? And then along with that diversification question, how do you also diversify across active investing and passive investing?
Right now, I'm really working on my strategy to diversify more because I've had such a concentration of multifamily or spread that out beyond Texas was only because I had some really conservative underwriters that were in another state. And both of them were aerospace engineers, so they were trusted to their underwriting. I was like, yes, we're good with these people. And, so I've had an apartment complex that I've invested in Aurora, Colorado.
Mm-hmm.
Also went over 3 times. And it was just a 100 unit, and it was location.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have one that's a portfolio that's in Brighton, Colorado. So it's 2, but they're within a block of each other.
Okay.
So we're monitoring that. And part of the reason that I really got connected with this investor was my daughter went to the University of Denver. And Sarah May, she's a native Coloradan. So we got into this conversation. She said, I've got this thing coming up. And she was part of the Sumac community. And that's how that all transpired. Some things just get it up on my radar screen because I had more contacts in other geographies.
Mm-hmm.
Who I had to work with people that I really trusted and that they had a very similar baseline of knowledge because I don't go about any of that nilly-willy. And I've had a couple of investments in Columbus, Ohio. Columbus, Ohio is fun if you can your property because they're like Austin, but they have a really improved affordability gap. It's just it's a lot cheaper to be there. But they're the state capital. They have some larger employers. And they got a lot going for them as well. Then I've had something in Jacksonville, Florida, and that came out well. And they did something a little unusual on the back end of that exit. They didn't totally exit. So I didn't really like that.
Yeah.
But I'm going to be on the hunt for those opportunities in the LP quadrant and then determine what I can do in the GP quadrant in Dallas-Fort Worth. Mm-hmm. And I also have a general partner who got me in a second mastermind. I'm in 2 masterminds, and he's moved from California to Arizona.
Okay.
We're going to see what's going on. And I know his underwriting is conservative, and I just know what I know a lot of elements of what he knows.
Yeah.
And I respect him. And he's been on a couple of LOIs with us where we've been best and final. So I'm willing to expand a team outside of the state, depending on who would be the lead.
Yeah.
And a lead that has gone full cycle
Mhm.
couple times.
Yeah.
And I would be willing to join a team where I have general partners who have gone full cycle. I've got 2 or 3 different options. The underwriting is just tough right now. It's having a little bit of a winter.
Yeah. Before we jump into the state of the industry today, because I know there's a lot, tell me very quickly, give me your professional background and your area of expertise that helps you in this real estate investing space.
Okay, interestingly enough, I have a couple of different superpowers, but they came from a couple of different places. In the beginning, I was a liberal arts undergraduate, rehabilitation major, minor in psychology. I was trained to listen like a counselor. That's very useful in a lot of different situations.
Probably the most useful skill. We talk about numbers a lot, but what's more important than numbers? It's networking, and that
Working.
networking with partners, networking with potential investors, investor relations after people become investors are like communication and psychology, and not manipulative psychology. That's not what I mean. Just the ability to listen, like you said, and to communicate effectively. The most important skill in this. So that's a good superpower to have here. So
It's power number 2 is the financial analysis, because I can whip through monthly reports. I created budgets before in a corporate life. I do have an MBA, so I do have some common base where I can figure out key performance indicators. It's just I have to know the context.
Yeah.
At one point in time, I was doing work for Sally Beauty in corporate. So it was same store sales. So you just have to convert what that looks like. And one very important thing that a finance director told me, Sharon, always remember that behind the numbers are human activity. And I never forgot that. And that is so true in real estate.
Yes. You just think about it. Every rent check our business receives comes from a human being who made a decision to live there based mostly on emotional factors. And we humans, like we try to say, oh, it's because it's got a great commute or because it's got a good school district. It's like the way we felt when we drove up. So those human factors and those psychology decisions, emotional factors are really what underlies any business. And the financial is the layer on top of the human aspect of it. So that's an important lesson to learn, because a lot of people have tendency to divide themselves into 2 camps. One, I love numbers, or the other, I love people, and they don't go together. But being able to bridge that, that's a superpower in and of itself.
It's got divergent skills.
Yeah. It's got to be a good team, though, with you and your husband. If his numbers are his best friends, right? The fact that I noticed in a lot of husband and wife teams, the husband will do the hard science and the wife says, I don't have anything to do with that. And in my relationship, that's the opposite. I do the spreadsheets and the underwriting. My husband's more of an operations guy. So when we're talking about numbers, or what do you call it? Like the numbers of the actual business, the financial KPIs, things like that. You guys, or my realm. So how have you found that you and your husband's skill set have interplayed successfully, and maybe some ways where it doesn't work, that you've had to consciously make a workaround?
Well, I have a great case study here, because we also have another general partner that tours the properties with me. And I was also a construction brat. So this is a very, very interesting combination of things. So he tours the properties with me. He's a microelectronic engineer. So we give him the role of, this has been our, how we operate, our modus operandi. He takes the pictures, and then I talk to people like a counselor.
Yes.
There we go. And they tell so many things. Mariana has been boggled. Dan has been boggled. Dan's seen this before, but in other situations. However, I will say we had a property that we wanted to acquire. However, in the underwriting, we had a $2 million gap between what some of the offers were coming in at. I told both these highly numbers driven men, the gap is too great to overcome. Something else is going on here. It's not just a pure syndication. I don't know what's that. I even talked to my mentor number 2 about it. And he said, yeah, you're right. That's too great to overcome. Turns around. It was a good call. Put a stop to it. Just stop. Had to tell the broker, we can't go there. That's what our underwriting's telling us. The buyer of the property ended up bringing in preferred equity and bought 2 of the properties in the portfolio, not just the one. So the scenario was very different from what was in our buy box and what we wanted to do. And guess what? Both the technical guys said, I'm glad you pulled the plug on that. But I had to be really insistent. I'm telling you, Emma, I had to be really insistent, because they did not, once they start, they don't want to stop, because they want to reach the level of perfection. Yeah, they do. I've seen them operate because we've been working this for a while. And sometimes you don't know all the facts.
Yeah.
These were 2 different scenarios. And we were going one way, and the buyer was going a different way. And we could not have known that until we learned that on the back end from another broker.
Similar to when you're competing against a 1031 buyer, what their motivations of, I'm going to have to pay a lot of money in taxes so I can afford to overpay a little more here, which I don't understand that with a 1031. If your goal is to save money on taxes, why do you just go waste it on, they're like, but that's equity, that's whatever. Anyway, it just makes it hard to compete when people have differing goals or purposes when they are purchasing a property. And some places way overpay because they're looking for a loss on their books on a different business. They're fee driven, so they're going to get commissions from the loan, from the sale. And that's a completely different model than what we're running. And so it definitely makes a big difference, that human reason why behind somebody is doing something. If you want to have the same conversation, it's a different buy box, like you said.
We're a totally different buy box. So you find out all these things on the back end, which is all what I've found is in multifamily and in real estate in general, it's really a small world. Eventually, you find out the reasons you don't know what's different. But in the end, you do find out because brokers, they're going to tell you stuff.
Yeah. Or sometimes the owners. I got an email in the other day from a Salt Lake City broker that is local to us and sent me an email saying, hey, this property's coming on the market. And I'm like, I know the owner of that property. So it's such a small community that you realize like, you don't do things wrong. Don't mess it up. Don't bad talk people. Don't screw people over. It will come back and anger. So
listen like a counselor.
it's definitely.
However, I will say Mariano was the one who kind of was the almost undercover cop in this situation because he is an investor of the buyer.
Oh, okay.
So I had brokers telling me things, and then the rest of the story from our other GP, who's the engineer.
Yeah, almost the researcher there. Now, you mentioned before masterminds and coaches. Jump forward to what you're doing today, what you're working on today. And let's kick it off by telling us about your experiences and opinions on masterminds and paid programs, because I know a lot of our listeners who are wanting to go down the active route are considering some pretty expensive programs, but also the limited partner who feels like, I don't really feel qualified to put money into this investment because I don't know how to read these documents, the performance and all that. Should a limited partner jump into a mastermind as well? Tell me about your experiences, thoughts, and opinions and how you choose what you're going to invest in from a mastermind and which you pass on.
Family. We did seek out coaches. It was some formalized training because we felt, no, he knows aerospace and I know financials. However, we didn't know all the language of real estate, investing, and assets, and entity creation. We didn't know that. So way back, it almost feels like the Stone Age now because it's been like almost 20 years. But we had coaches with Russ Whitney. And in fact, one of the coaches with Russ Whitney that we had in 2006 asked us to come and give a presentation on the power of syndications at his real estate investment club that's been around for 22 years in Tarrant County. So all things come around full circle. But also we did that even with multifamily. So we joined personal mentoring. Brad had not developed his mastermind yet. He didn't really do that until 2018, 2019. And we began with that in 2019. And then I was invited by another general partner that we'd been on an LOI together, my second mentor, and that's Hunter Thompson with Raise Masters. And I wanted to really sharpen my saw regarding capital raise. And Greg Butcher knew that. So he invited me to come to Raise Fest in 2023. So that's why we did that. And I guess part of the reason too, because since Dan and I both have our MBAs, we really value formal education in more of a structured environment.
Mm-hmm.
I will tell you, in each of these communities, it hasn't just been the mentor. It's been who is the mentee. Because I've met people who have traveled a road that is very aspirational to me. I feel honored to be their real estate friends. And we do keep in touch. And with Brad's group, we have a WhatsApp group. And with Hunter, he's got Slack. They each have their different forms that they're operating on. And also different platforms that they're emphasizing for their student base. And as far as social media, because Brad, it was always Facebook more initially. And that's where he had his personal mentoring and foundation page for his student base initially. And he's got a mastermind page now too. But with Hunter, to be in connection with investors, he emphasizes LinkedIn. Very interesting and different strategies as far as what they do. But more of a fund to funds guy. He's been more in your quadrant versus the operator.
Yeah, definitely. So you've joined less masterminds than you could. We all have.
There's a lot out there, but I've to be really selective and have been referred.
Okay.
But with Brad grew into that more because when we came in 2015, the renewal for the personal mentoring is not much.
Yeah.
Because we're early arrivers in his program. And so we were able to grow into really more the mentoring side. And I will tell you, being in his mastermind, especially in the 2019 space, there were people already there referring us to be in that who were already general partners, where we were LP investors. They were vertically integrated people. It was Reap Equity, Jacob and Arlene Garza out of San Antonio, Texas. I'm sure you're aware of them. They've got a machine.
Yeah.
They really do. And they know what they're doing.
Friendly working with fund of funds too. That's what I like about them.
Yes. And that's a different animal on the horizon too. We have to all figure out how we work together too.
Yeah.
That's an interesting thing too.
Bring those strengths and weaknesses and complementary strengths and weaknesses. I want to really spend a lot of time really getting to the state of the industry right now, because you've been doing this as an LP for a while, getting into the general partner side. There's a lot there about making that decision, but maybe we'll talk about that later. Your lifestyle choices, deciding your business on how you want your lifestyle to look. But first, let's just talk about what's going on with multifamily, recent rate cuts, commercial real estate in general. What have you been seeing since you were first exposed to the syndication of larger commercial properties in 2015 over the last 9 years? What has changed and what hasn't changed?
What has changed certainly are those interest rate hikes. And so I have a whole little list here.
Yes.
We can have our special talk. What I didn't see were the frequency of capital calls. Didn't see that because money was cheap, Emma. Back in 2015, it really was. And what is really being required of general partners is really tight asset management and very conservative underwriting to get through the higher price of money environment. So that's what's really been required. And then also the distribution pauses. Now, what I've heard several general partners talk about in the past is to really have investors who want to be multiple investors with you. And I have been multiple investors with certain people, and Reap Equity is one.
Wow.
But so I'll send a little shout out to them. But it's kind of like candy. You get I guess a little dopamine hit, a little that kind of thing. And when you've got pause distributions, it's a little tougher on the communication side because you're not getting the incremental amount of money, even though in multifamily, the exit strategy is really where you have the big gain. And I've been in that space long enough to really fully understand that and know that. And I've not even been crazy excited when there was a cash out refi because it lowers your distribution when you didn't pause distribution.
Your money back now. We're not going to pay you.
And then the time horizon is just going to be longer. Are you going to get everything done in a 5-year time period? Probably not. Probably not. And that was your initial business model. But those are some things I really see. Plus, I will say, circling back to the interest rate cut, that is going to start assisting with some of those who are in bridge loans.
Okay.
Not initially, because it's going to have to start going down further. And there are some people who are hanging on by their fingernails because they do not want to sell right now because guess what? Especially if you've got preferred equity coming in, they're going to circle like a shark because you are not in your prime business model position. Your expenses aren't where you want to be. Your cash position is not where you want it to be. They're not going to want to sell, so they're going to want to hang on. That is what I'm seeing, some real hang on. But tightening up their asset management can help them some, but they're really wanting to be able to breathe again when interest rates start trending lower. We're not just talking quarterly. We're talking about multiple quarters.
How many hikes were there? Like 11? It's going to keep.
I think there might have been 13, actually.
Really? Yeah. One half-point drop. I think it's a good omen, but
it's just a drip.
Yeah.
It's just a drip. It's throwing out the life raft, but you haven't pulled the person in on the ship to say drowning yet.
Well, we've noticed that inflation, though, has touched every aspect of our business except for our sale price. Like the offers that we have a property for sale right now that is in a good position. We bought it in 2019. We got it into a good, stable Freddie fixed rate debt before any of this rate hike and weirdness was on the horizon. And it's just chugging along. So we put it on the market and the values are off. Like the cap rates have definitely expanded. And so I'm like, okay, so we're paying more for our labor. We're paying more for our supplies. We're paying more for this. Rents have gone up, but our pricing as our exit is down. And that is, like you said, that is 80% of the business plan is what you can exit on. And so when prices are down, it's worth what people are going to be willing to pay for it. I don't care what the cap rate is. When the offers start coming in is when you know what that's worth. And so how have you seen that pricing affecting those exits? Because the inflation is affecting cash flow. It's reducing cash. And if the pricing is off, like the prices aren't inflated, the cap rates are going up, is meaning that we're going to sell it for less, is affecting our exits. So we're getting hammered on both sides right now, what I'm seeing.
Yep, that's what I'm seeing too. And those are the conversations I'm having with general partners because I have taken the time not only to, even as passive, to read the monthly reports, but to also call and also lobby for the webinars where it's needed, especially if you're wanting to change the positioning. If you've got a property that's a little more challenged than the business plan initially showed, it didn't show a lot of factors that were going on.
Yeah.
Then I'm really not comfortable, especially after you've had a capital call, bringing in preferred equity because they're going to change the debt position for the syndicated investors.
Okay, so let me quickly define preferred equity, and then you tell me how it's affecting what we got going on. So preferred equity is basically somebody who comes in and they're getting paid right after the lenders. So lenders get paid first, senior, and then comes in preferred equity. And so if you, as a limited partner, have common equity, you're going to be getting paid right after the lenders. But preferred equity will come in and insert between when the common equity gets paid and when the loan gets paid. Preferred equity is becoming more and more common as rescue capital. And I'm seeing it becoming even more common on acquisition. So things that didn't have any preferred equity at all, we're starting to offer preferred equity in order to entice capital because it's hard to raise capital right now. You said money was cheap. Now it's not. So tell me the evolution that you've seen of preferred capital and then just capital markets in general being more difficult to raise capital now versus say 2015, how that's affecting the acquisitions, the ability to actually get a project funded. I'm seeing big changes just since I've been in this since 2018. And I would love to hear your insight on that.
One of the things is, I mean, if you're coming into an acquisition and you're stating upfront that there's going to be a preferred equity component, I think it's a little different thing.
You know about it at least.
About it. And the property, since it's a new acquisition, it is not in a challenged position regarding any of the KPIs, regarding the financials. It's not in that place. Where I have a little more heartburn is if you're trying to do that on the back end as rescue, and you have not necessarily flushed out all of the possible solutions. It's where I have the beef. And that's what I communicated on a webinar.
So what are you seeing then? Because we had a project in Austin that we invested in that eventually foreclosed. It was purchased, I think it was in January, and the first of those 11, 13 rate hikes was in like March. So they didn't have any chance to do any value add at all before their payment started spiking. Right. And I think it was just a perfect storm because their delinquency skyrocketed as well because COVID payments got snatched at the same time. So they had people not paying their rent at the same time their mortgage was just going out of control. They even had a rate cap. I think they got up to that rate cap in the first couple of hikes. It was crazy. And it eventually foreclosed and it was this horrible experience. But we as investors, they reached out to us and said, we need rescue capital bad. Anybody was anybody. They weren't ready for introductions. So we were all very involved in that process of searching for rescue capital because we knew that it would be less bad than a foreclosure. So tell me what are the things you're seeing that people are trying or what they should be trying before they get to that point of saying, we'll just give rescuers whatever they want, just come in and save this. What comes before that?
I would say, first of all, really communicate with your investors.
Yeah.
I've had an investor that actually originally sent out a capital call by email. What? And the rate of failure was like 100%. That didn't take a whole lot of common sense to really figure out that was going to happen that way. But I would say just have some other options available to discuss. What's happened with one general partner team that I had this discussion with on the webinar, they have some other solutions that they are investigating now, but they didn't seek those out first. And then the timing between that capital call, so you would have cash infusion, and then you turn around and say you're going to try to get some rescue capital. The timing was ill-advised, I thought.
Okay.
That's what I work. So do things in a certain sequence. And if you're headed to foreclosure, you obviously need to really take some real serious action. You're really in crisis mode. So that really suggests you're going to have to move in a crisis manner. And that's a difference between what I saw in the property that I'm invested in,
right,
versus headed for foreclosure. Because unfortunately, I have been in a community where, and I was in a mastermind with a couple, and it was a husband-wife team, both physicians, and they couldn't save that share.
Yeah.
And that is heartbreaking.
Mm-hmm.
Go down like that. When you have people who are so well-intentioned and they really do want to bring people in who aid them on their wealth journey. That's what they want to do. And that's what Dan and I want to do. That's what our partners.
Yeah.
So I feel like it's a different situation, but there's a lot more crowdfund coming into acquisitions now, I'm saying. And have you seen a lot more of that? Because we're going to be talking to our SEC attorney in Denton. Now, a lot more. I'm just going to investigate what will crowdfunding bring to the table in a harder capital raise time period.
Yeah, we have not done a crowdfund. Definitely on our radar since they changed it from $1 million to $5 million. It becomes much more attractive. But for fund two, like fund one that we're doing right now, it's a $15 million retail fund. And anybody raising less than about $20 million a year really is just focused on retail investors, large institutional check writers. We had to raise one time, I think it was 36 million. And the institutions that were writing the checks kept saying, "It's the smallest check I've ever written." There's this kind of strange donut hole between a big 20 to $100 million check that institutions are going to write, and then these 5 to 10 million, $15 million raises that we do on the retail side. It's a lot of money to raise from retail capital, but until you're ready to jump in that toy, 50 to $100 million fund is really when you want to start considering an institutional fund at that amount. 15, 20, 25, it's just retail and it's really challenging. But if we do go in the institutional fund route for fund two, then we would sidecar that with some sort of a crowd fund because we're current investors who want to keep investing with us.
Right.
We have new people who come in and when we say, okay, we can't accept retail investors anymore, or only qualified investors, something like that. So I find that crowdfunding allows you to go institutional if that's the path that you choose. And it allows you to keep some retail investors in there, people that are close to you, people who know and trust you, can put in a lot less money. It really diversify pretty heavily. Are you seeing something like crowdfunding be more attractive because people can put in less money because they can diversify across more assets? I know that neither one of us are crowdfunding expert. Is this a response to the tightened capital markets that we're seeing right now?
I believe that it is, but I will tell you, the SEC attorney that we'll be talking to, he'll really be the expert on that one. It was like, where is this really appropriate? And then also, how do you allow your retail investors to coexist? Because if you've got these people who they're like a garden and you've been, cultivating and feeding them and watering them, all that. But you want to be able to give them opportunities. Well, because they've been experiencing real estate alongside of you as an investor. And we have some long-term relationships with people who are only passive investors.
Yeah.
And they've invested in significant numbers of multifamily. But I will say it's interesting because funds do allow other people to be smaller investors. Because I was on another podcast with a person who he's in Grant Cardone's fund. So the entry was low, the numbers.
And it's also a myth or misunderstanding in the industry that if the fund minimum is 50,000, 75,000, 100,000, those are pretty typical minimums on a fund or a syndication,
right?
That people can't come in for less than that. And they absolutely can. So here's a dirty little secret. It's not legal minimum. You just go to some, I've never invested with you before. I'd like to put in 10 grand and see how we get along, see how you communicate, see how you do. And if you're unaccredited, they will often put you on a waiting list. But if you're accredited and you're not counting against their total number of unaccredited investors they can have in an investment, unaccredited is limited. If you're accredited and you only want to put in 10 grand to try them on for size, just ask. Most of them will let you.
Right. We've come in at less than the threshold.
Oh yeah, me plenty.
We have leveraged that accredited investor status to do it. I love the way you're thinking on this one because it's like you can try them on for size and come in at a lower amount and see how they operate. I like to see how they communicate, especially in these times. Are they communicating? Because it's going to take a whole lot more than a monthly report and a wink and a nod.
Yeah, especially if things are not going well. But so what kinds of diversification have you done outside of, say, multifamily? Though, I know with us, we were doing we were private lenders. And so we've just doubled down on the private lending because after we retired, we needed the cash flow. We couldn't wait until the back end of an exit on a multifamily. We needed cash flow right now. And that'll probably change over the years as our cash flow situation. Yeah, we got plenty coming in. We can throw something that is more of a growth minded thing. You had to change your strategy at all as you've been relying on your own passive income to make sure that you still have enough cash coming in to live your life and pay the bills and all.
I would diversify and just really take a look and understand that the strength of multifamily, which is a long-term gain. It's a long-term gain. So sandwich in some other cash flow options. We are invested in a triple net fund. So we do have some triple net. And those are in the areas retail, return lease retail, as AutoZone, Family Dollar, stuff like that. I know some people are doing some car wash. So I just have to see where it makes sense. And Dean and I have begun that conversation. We just have to, it's like a puzzle. You have to put some of those pieces together.
Yeah.
And what can be very similar is if you've invested in stocks and bonds. But you just need to diversify, but you're just deciding to diversify totally in the alternative investment bucket.
Yes. And bonds and loans are not the same thing, but at the core, they're very similar. And so when I'm doing private lending, I think of that more like the bonds part of my portfolio. And then the equity portion is the stocks. And because that's exactly what a stock is, you're buying equity in a company and your value goes up when they're more profitable. Even if they're not paying distributions, most of them don't, or dividends, right? And most of them are not dividends, but then you get paid on the exit when you sell the stock. It's the same thing with multifamily, you get paid on the exit. But in order to get some more cash flow, a little lower risk profile, because lender gets paid first. Remember that? We were talking about where I want to get paid first. I want to hold that note or the lien on that property. So for us, it's been a multi-pronged approach to figure out, like, we don't want to completely sacrifice growth for cash flow. But if you can get something that cash flows and has high growth, I think the unicorn in this industry.
Oh, yeah, definitely. But I look at it this way. If I'm in a couple of different communities, then there's some options I can explore and people who are going these directions.
Yeah.
I just have to keep putting the word out is, okay, this is what's going to make sense for us right now. And I'll be at an event, Brad, like this week, and also with Hunter Thompson, middle of October. And we'll just have those conversations. We'll be having those conversations at dinners.
Yeah.
What's really very interesting about being in a couple of masterminds is you have those conversations. A lot of times you're in communities or collections of people that they don't talk about that. It's like kind of a secret. But when you're in masterminds, it's like people are willing to share the secret.
Have you been getting a lot of emails or promotions from syndicators who were double, triple down on multifamily? And now you're getting, oh, we're opening up a fund to do blue collar businesses. Oh, and we're going to open up a fund to do basically non-real estate related stuff. And I wonder, are they jumping ship? Or how much do they actually know about this? You build your reputation around being an expert at one thing, and then suddenly you want to diversify into another thing. It's a tough road to walk to be like, I'm an expert in multifamily, but it's not going so right now. So I'm going to be an expert in this new thing. Now, have you seen a lot of that going on? Because I sure have.
Oh, I definitely have. I've been in masterminds with people like that. Honestly, now they're oil and gas.
Yes.
Guess what? I was just at a women's summit, and there was a person who was in oil and gas, and she owns a company, and her brother's a driller, and her father started the business. So, yeah, I know you started a multifamily. Why not? Why don't I invest with the person who has the company, does that, and then she might want to invest in something else too for diversifying her portfolio. So I see some real benefits in that as well. So just taking a look at some different classes, and in the future, I think oil and gas could work. We've got something that's small oil and gas because it was part of an inheritance from Dan. And then self-storage. Dan is, okay, how would that really work? Because you have to learn all the KPIs. People bring you up. So I really like what you were talking about. You coming in as a accredited investor and figure out, hey, I've got some cash and I really want to see how the nuts and bolts of this work.
Yep.
Maybe I come in at X.
Yeah.
Is this. And then you can learn the language of their performance, the KPIs. Yeah.
Yeah. And I heard investors, they don't want to invest less than 250 because it's too hard to keep track of where all their money is. So everybody's going to have a different threshold of where they start to get heartburn and say, oh, 50,000 sounds about right. I'll try on different syndicators at 50,000. Some people are 10,000. It really just depends on you and how much money you have to invest, what your personal risk tolerance is, and what you consider to be like a tester amount versus this is an actual full investment, because it can run the range. But just, it's a gut check there. That's definitely a feeling of like, how comfortable do I feel with these people, and how much am I willing to risk on trying this relationship out? That's the best way, is just do business with them. It's, you go to a store and you're going to buy a small product, see how you like it. And if you like it, you're going to buy more. You're going to tell all your friends about it. For the first time, it's just a little tester. And I don't think people realize they can do that with real estate, with people who are experts at what they do. Like when I've been doing private lending all this time. When I wanted to institutionalize it and open a fund that had private lending, I'm multifamily, right? Like my two partners are private lenders, and they're the ones who bring deals, underwrite deals. And I still look for the equity. Like my role in the fund is to find multifamily kind of equity investments, because that's what I specialize in. So I don't want to become an expert in a new thing, like maybe ever.
I was going to say, I think that, and I don't really think you have to, because if you have some other opportunities, and you're seeking opportunities.
Yeah.
That's really part of my story anyway, and Dan's story, is we've been seeking opportunities all along. This is just another opportunity that we discovered while we were looking at some more cash flow component. Love the long-term game. We wanted to figure out something that was going to fit in more of the short-term intermediary term.
Yeah.
As far as the cash flow. So just putting all those pieces together. And I do love your recommendation regarding that. I am going to use that certainly in the future, because we've even waited for a threshold to lower.
Yeah.
So we waited for that. But why not proactively say, especially if it's a different asset class?
Yeah.
Oh, hey, could we try this out? Because I'm a kind of a person who can learn as I go. as I'm already doing a lot of these kinds of things, and I just want to figure out what some of the metrics are, what some of the drivers are.
Yeah. And we have investors in our fund. Our fund has a $50,000 minimum, but because we're a multi-deal fund, each deal is only 10 grand. And so we have some people say, I am soft committing 50,000 to your fund, but I'm going to drip it in $10,000 at a time, $10,000 per deal over the next couple of months or 6 months or whatever it is. So that's something that we built into the fund from the get-go.
Interesting.
Was we started the fund when multifamily was pretty rocky. And I told my partners, I said, I would really prefer to do private lending right now. That gives me an opportunity to be more, I hate to use this word, but more vulture-like on the multifamily front.
Mhm.
And while we're keeping money moving and investor money moving in the short-term debt, then I can be soaring above on the prowl to see what's there. But if I started a multifamily specific fund, I would have felt like I had to find deals to fill it. And I just was like, not really loving what I was seeing. So I think that's one of the pivots that we've made where I don't think multifamily is going anywhere. It's a very strong asset class. It's going to continue to dominate American housing. I think that it'll just be growing as people move around more and get more mobile and work remote more. I think there's still a lot of opportunity in single family, but I'm not an expert in single family and don't ever want to be.
I will say I started in single family, so I will tell you it was difficult going on vacation. You never got away.
Yeah.
If you're self-managing your own portfolio, you just never, ever get away because something is always going to be breaking. And with the size of the portfolio, we didn't hire out a third-party property manager. I did initially, but then I fired him because he wasn't turning the houses quick enough. And I felt like I could do that better. Guess what? I got that job. And I never was able to shake that job until we made a transition over to multifamily. But I worked like some other components just to see how they operate and also see what the cash flow
Yeah.
is looking in that. Because then you can have it's like having a full train
Yeah.
with all of the compartments in the train as well as the engines.
Yeah. I think the single family has the illusion of looking like it has better cash flow because those capital expenditure, people who own single families typically don't budget for capital expenditures. But in multifamily, I have CapEx lines from the day that I'm even underwriting and thinking about buying it. And I have all of those CapEx purchases scheduled out. This is about how often we'll have a water heater go out. This is about when a roof will parking lot or sidewalks will need to be replaced. I know what's coming up. With single family, they tend to not plan ahead for that kind of stuff. So they'll get this huge bill that sucks up 4 years worth of cash flow. They're like, oh, the cash flow so well, the cash flow so great, but they don't factor in CapEx. And so they have, like I said, that illusion of cash flowing faster and better. And maybe they do a little, but once you factor in the CapEx, I just don't think the cash flow is any better in single family than it is in multi.
No. And then you're capped at that carryover loss if you have a big expenditure. Because I've lived that life too.
Yeah.
We had a mast on this very modest little 1957 house.
Okay.
That just ate away 10 grand. I know.
Yeah. And then how did that happen on your taxes? Because people,
Carryover loss, you're capped at the carryover loss.
yeah.
Not like you get the loss up front, like in multifamily, which you have your separate CapEx budget. But yeah, you get that up front in multifamily.
Yeah.
And you have to do the carryover in single family, which is a real pain until exit.
Yeah.
Then all that other loss you can claim at the time of the sale.
Yeah. It doesn't have as good a tax benefits in single family as
does.
family. Our RV park actually has been the best tax situation that we've had because the underground, I think of RV park as multifamily, at least ours, because it's long term. And so we treat it like another apartment building. But the depreciation on it is fantastic because it's depreciated not over 27 and a half years and 16 years or something like that. So it's actually a better, and so paying attention to those taxes and what asset class you're in, for example, private lending, no tax benefits. That is active income and I'm taxed on that as ordinary income. So I do have to keep enough multifamily commercial real estate around to get that depreciation so that
You got to balance for your tax position.
even though interest income to me feels very passive, it's not taxed as passive income, it's taxed as earned income. And so I need to have the because we're a real estate professional, so I can offset my earned income with depreciation if I plan correctly. So for us, the tax benefits have become like its own stream of income, like its own little business that we have to pay attention to, plan for, and execute properly to make the most money out of it. And that's where multifamily definitely outshines like single family stuff.
Definitely. And since Dan has his W-2, I'm actually the real estate professional. So yeah, we did that for our tax position.
Yeah.
And we had a weaker tax position as single family real estate investors versus multifamily real estate investors. And then we had the bonus depreciation. Of course, that's stepping down, but
Somebody will bring it back eventually.
we'll see how to work that back in. However, even with that, it's a stronger position.
Yeah.
Before 100% bonus depreciation was entered into the equation, that year was a lot better. But if you're really working your asset classes like a chess piece almost, a chess player, then you're going to be straddling the tax sheltering world and the game, because you can't just have the money going in and flowing out to the IRS.
Mhm.
Or then you are not, as you and I both know, then we have no multi-generational wealth for our children.
Yeah. Taxes and insurance were not very interesting to me until I started thinking like a business. And suddenly they got a lot more interesting because I saw how much they were directly affecting my life. If I didn't do it correctly, I was wasting a lot of money and it was negating all the work that I was doing to build wealth because I was leaking too much. And so when I realized, oh, multiple streams of income, treat this stuff like a stream of income and
Right.
pay attention to it, get serious. And then it became a lot more interesting to me.
Or when I started
Yeah.
thinking that way, it's, oh, you can really get closer and closer to zero
Mhm.
tax. And it's, yes, this is a ship I want to sail on, because we're the ones working in the business.
Property taxes.
What we do in Texas,
This is about zero tax, but this is like from a personal business liability center. Like we pay a lot of taxes. And it's more about shifting the taxes over to, say, the business paying property taxes and things like that versus paying it on your personal. So I think about it that way. It's like, where am I paying taxes and how do I minimize so much leakage? Technically, we still pay a lot of taxes. That's one of our biggest line items on the business. But I don't want to be paying more. It's almost like a double taxation of a corporation. Like Orban is sole proprietor. I don't run those kind of businesses. I don't want to get stuck paying taxes like those kind of businesses.
frankly, the government incentivizes us to be entrepreneurial. So we might as well take advantage of what we contribute out in society.
Yeah. We pay a lot of payroll tax too for our employees, things like that. So it's just being more deliberate and intentional about how we're spending our money, basically, is the way to look at it there. I love this conversation because you're really giving our listener the perspective of what it's like to invest in something from more of a limited partner perspective. And it gives you a lot of insight into the operators that you choose now that you're raising capital for deals yourselves. And so can you tell our listener a little bit about that venture of yours and where you see yourself over the next, say, 5-ish years, both personally and professionally?
I think I'm going to be straddling the worlds. I look forward to the general partner world.
Mhm.
We're on the hunt, but it has to be in the buy box.
Yeah.
And this is the conversations that I have with brokers, because I have brokers that are calling me and they want me to invest in something that's too small. It is outside my buy box.
Mhm.
I just look at it this way. I look at it as the opportunity to restate my buy box over and
Yeah.
over again. That's fine, no problem, because if I wanted something smaller, I would have an investment in another LLC. We operate multiple LLCs, so that's what I would do. But I would look to move forward in that, and I'm going to create another LLC. My business partner spouse and I are going to create another LLC, and our daughter will be a partner in it. And she's 20 years old. It's multiple streams of income. This is what we're looking at, multiple streams of income. And for the long game, it's multifamily for her as well. For her. With our other LLCs, we have the opportunity to really dip our toe into some other more short-term cash producing using your tip. So grateful that I'm here with you today, because then we can dip the toe in and figure out how things are working. But it is really great coming from a place where you are an accredited investor. But you didn't start there. You know, had to work our way to be there, then utilize the strength of being in that financial position.
Yeah. My first apartment syndication was a 506C, and I was not an accredited investor. So I basically were accredited for that deal only because we were executives on the deal.
Yep.
And that deal is part of what helped catapult us over the line, what we needed net worth wise to become an accredited investor. So you don't start out that way, but
And that, that's okay, because you can utilize the asset classes at your disposal and then just work your way into that. And that's just really not a problem. If you think about it as a long-term, it's like a long game. And this is the way I look at it. Since our daughter, I have one daughter. She's my heir. And so I look at this as multi-generational. I really do, because what I do doesn't end with me. It really doesn't. And what you and I are talking about today doesn't end with us, because we're talking about things that many investors should know. We want them to know. We want them to be very informed investors, at least sophisticated or savvy investors.
Yeah.
Understand what you're getting into so you mitigate your risks. That's what we want people to be at minimum. And then future, they'll be in the accredited investor pot or position because they've been mitigating their risks so well.
Yeah. Oh, goodness. Yeah. I had a lot of kids so that they would fight over it later.
I have the one, so she's always critiquing what we're doing, which is very fascinating. It's, oh, what are you doing in this pod, or whatever you're doing here? What are you doing what are you telling people on podcasts? Now she's wanting to know, what am I telling people on podcasts regarding our experience and just being the wisest investor you can be?
Yeah.
I ask so many questions. And I tell people, be happy to be in the position that you're at, whether you're sophisticated or accredited. Either way, you can be a more generous human being.
Yes.
Have more to work with. You just really there's no need being shamed about money. It just
Yeah.
really isn't.
I think Americans struggle with that a little bit. Working with as many bankers and finance people now that I do in New York City, one of my colleagues, he asked me a question. You're religious, right? I said, yeah. And he says, can I ask you like a religion question? I said, sure. He says, I'm Jewish. And I don't understand why Christians don't talk about money. So I don't know if I've ever really thought about it like that before. And he says, it's weird. And it's like Americans in general don't really want to talk about money. He said, we talk about money all the time. I asked my neighbor how much he pays for his car and he tells me. And I'm like, oh, that is weird. We are not doing our children a service by refusing to have these conversations.
I will say, and that's why it's been very interesting for me to be in different communities because we openly talk about it. However, in families, I will say, especially Dan's family, they're so buttoned up about money. It's just crazy. We were investing with part of an inheritance. We had already created wealth before that. And both the sisters, they acquired a second home. There's no asset on that front.
Eventually, that's a very long-term plan right there.
That's a very long-term liability.
Inheritances are like winning the lottery. If you're ready for it, you invest it wisely. But if you're not, you just blow it. And wealthy people don't play the lottery.
They don't. They really,
Yeah. I guess that's a thing. It's don't gamble. Like real estate is one of those, you will get rich eventually. Almost for sure. If you do not quit, you will get rich eventually. And I love the certainty of that. Yeah, and the days that, because you're talking about playing chess, we're talking about complicated stuff here, and people might be listening to me like, this sounds so complicated. I don't actually want to do this. And that's a choice you have to make. If you want to be wealthy, you have to be committed to the process and you have to want it bad enough. And if you don't, then it's certainly a lot of complication if you don't really feel that strongly about it.
But however, you and I will be the ones who take fun trips and go to people and talk about money.
Yeah, my kids are having to get used to it because it's a new side of me. And they have the typical American wealth bashing attitude that when I want to talk about money and building wealth, I'm having to get through their own barriers of that. And my husband had those barriers for a long time. We were a little bit more open about money in my family growing up. And for me, I was like, why wouldn't you want to make more money? You can help more people and do more fun stuff and all this. And they're like, Mom, all you want to talk about is money. That's all you care about. I'm thinking, all right, really? That's all you've known me for a long time. I've only been doing this wealth building thing for the last 6 or 7 years. And so to me, it's a barrier that we definitely have to get past to have these conversations. And that's part of what this podcast is about, is so that if families or people don't have this kind of education, they have somewhere to go. What's a win? You can listen to people like us talking it real talk about money and getting a very deep look into how we do things, the decisions we make, because who else can you sit down and pick their brain for an hour and a half to ask about as a question?
Can't do that with everybody. But I will say what's very interesting, you made a really good point, Emma, that some families don't talk about money. In my family, it was like, do you think there's a money trick? It was a whole scarcity thing. Like we're just barely getting by. I had an after-school job, and it was pharmacists that taught me about credit. So what I wanted to really share with everybody on this front is that even though you and I may be strangers to many people, we can talk about money, and something is going to be unique for your application. You'll be able to bring that into your life, just like I did with learning the credit from pharmacists at my after-school high school job. I guess things were on my brain at a very early age.
The scarcity mindset, though, in a way has really blessed my life. And people don't talk about this often because we're so focused on the abundance mindset. But that kind of trail that you just mentioned, the chain that you go on, a little bit of money was scarce in my family, big family, stay-at-home mom. So we had to be very careful. But I didn't have a car. We couldn't pay for car insurance. And so I was babysitting until I was 18. And even after I graduated college, still no driver's license, still no car, I didn't know how I was going to pay my insurance. So I started thinking I'm just going to have to keep babysitting. And the upgraded version of babysitting is being a nanny. So I moved in with 2 physicians and lived in their home with them for 18 months. And so that scarcity that I grew up with, that I saw as a negative, actually set off a chain of events that put me in a home with extremely wealthy people who were high achievers, well-educated. And they're the ones who taught me so many life lessons about balancing life and wealth building, and just what a realistic look into how a wealthy family lives, the decisions they make, and what their lifestyle looks like, where they splurge, where they don't. So that scarcity, if I'd had a car, if it probably just would have gone off to college like anybody else, and probably would not have ended up in the situation that I ended up in, which ended up being more of a blessing through giving me the abundance mindset. So I think it's important to balance our experiences and say, this is me, this is what built me, and I am going to turn that into a benefit rather than a detriment.
And also you can make some different choices. Like I make very different choices for my daughter. She went away to college, so she had the college experience, debt-free, lives in Washington, D.C. It's a weird, very expensive place to be living. Some friends have jokingly told her that's the equivalent of a dowry because she has no student loan debt, but she's living her best life. She's living in an A-class apartment, which I I'm not an A-class investor. You may not be an A-class investor, but it's okay that Aunt Norbital can live in an A-class apartment if she so chooses, as long as eventually she has multiple streams of income and enrolling her
Yeah.
college.
And it's different when you're sitting in an apartment thinking to yourself, someday I'm going to own a building like this. That's not the same experience as somebody's just trying to live beyond their means in an apartment.
Exactly.
Yeah, or not.
B is still a sweet space, really.
I agree. Yeah, that's a little piece of a nugget right there. Invest in B-class properties. You will make more money with less risk. So A, too risky. C, too risky. B, nice level. And it may not have the sexiest, like high returns sometimes, but because they lose money less often, that's overperforming in the long run. So I'm a big fan of B properties. They're easy to run too, so you don't have to be quite as much of a warrior when you're managing a B-class property.
You can keep your timely rent. Your tenants will pay timely. And that's been my experience really in our portfolio, even of passive investments.
Yeah.
B is sweet. If I can get to, even as a general partner, B minus, C plus, or triangulate closer to that, that's worthwhile. And since my daughter is in an A class, I know that they have to provide all kinds of concierge service. That people work a lot of overhead with the A class.
My C class, definitely we call it the door kicker warrior because you're in there. Hey, you gave me a rent in this week. First class is a warrior in a different way because you have to have an extremely high level of customer service and customer satisfaction. And I definitely feel like I'm like going to war when I'm looking at those properties. But fascinating discussion. I really love getting into the head of a limited partner and all the things that you've learned and how you're taking that to apply to a business. I'm highly opposite. I'm watching you start a business or want to be an operator, and I'm trying to get out of that and become more of a passive investor. And it's just interesting. We have different phases, and I don't want to get out of it too much because I know I'm going to get bored. And so it's interesting. You're taking on a healthy amount. You're taking the knowledge that you've gained because it's a high value skill that you have from all of this LP experience and capitalizing on that, but not just throwing away we're going to get rid of all our LPs and aggregate all our money into a big apartment building. Like you're still like,
we'll just have some different acquisitions. So we'll just trade that out and see how those perform and how those operators perform. And the way I look at it is, since I was a financial analyst and a senior business analyst, it's just best practices to incorporate into our general partnership teams. Yeah. That's just the way I look at it. Benchmarking. It's just benchmarking.
Yeah. How do people get a hold of you? And I always ask, why should people get a hold of you after the show? What kind of person would benefit by getting to know you better?
Yeah. And I did. Yeah. I wrote that down too, Emma. They can reach me at my website. It's www.excalibur. And I'm going to spell that out. It's funky. EXCALIBRE Texas.com. ExcaliburTexas.com. That's the website. So then you can go through and then you can get your free gift. We have a Money for Life call as well on top of that little gift. And then you can book a call with me. I'm also on a lot of social media. That's where Emma and I, met each other through social media and a mutual podcast friend. And one of the goals that I really have is multi-generational wealth. Because not only do I want to be generous for my daughter, who's 20, but I want to be generous for the family. I am a great aunt 8 times over now. It's a girl pack. That's what we got going on until somebody decides to be the outlier of that. And I like to be generous for all of these girls too, as well as nephews and nieces and all of that. So it's not just the family, but my broader community as well. I like to donate to the food bank in Denton because it's really important. I don't want hungry people. Just don't want that. I just don't think that really helps anybody do anything super productive because you need to eat and sustain yourself.
Hierarchy of needs.
Yes, exactly. Math that's what I'm all about. I like to go fun places, but I also like to give back a whole lot. And it really gives me a lot of joy to be able to give back to my family, specifically my daughter, my broader community, my church community, and globally. And one thing that I'd really like to mention really quickly is Share the Love. It is a charity that gives standard wheelchairs globally for Mexico, the United States, as well as further south of Czech. If you've been to one of those events, which I have, just to see how people have really supported an individual community member and a family member and have loved them and they have carried them like their entire life. When you see that, it is very humbling and you think, I certainly can help that in some way.
Yeah, my brother is a quadriplegic and just getting him in and out of a wheelchair is so tough. Just think what would it be like if they heated that?
And I will say my business partner and spouse, Dean, is now in a wheelchair. He has one that is his partner. It collapses and goes in the car with him. And all the engineers at his aerospace job find that very interesting because it's stuff that moves and does stuff. It's how makes you think about things a little differently. I know you do and I do because we have someone in our lives that's very special to us and they have a different means that they have to move around.
Yeah. It's a lot more than I realized from the outside before our family experienced that. And I'm still not even all that involved in the day-to-day. And it's shocking, just how much is involved beyond just what meets the surface. So I think it's a great cause. And I think a lot of the listeners of the show, it's who we attract. It's people who are looking to build wealth, get better returns with less risk so they can go out and do more. My daughter woke up on Saturday morning and she said that she needed the car. And I said, where are you going? She said, we're going down to volunteer in the charity garden. And I said, who are you going with? She says, oh, a date. Someone I met online. So she's going on a first date, go volunteer at the food bank garden. I thought, all right, that is actually pretty cool. So she was having fun on a date while she was serving. And those are the kinds of people that we like to interview on the show and the investors that we like to work with. So I appreciate you sharing your story, Sharon, and talking about why you do things and also sharing all of your knowledge about that you amassed over the last years of being an investor. So important. So if you want to get a hold of Sharon, be sure to reach out to her on her website, jump online at investwithemma.com and get on a call, talk to us in real life, and we will do our best to get you pointed in the right direction so that you can start building the life of your dreams with more passive income so you can go on more adventures. So thanks for joining us.
Thank you.